Today we have a crazy revenge story involving someone's entire family. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, maybe stop stealing designs? My life was not always like this. Well, I don't think anybody's life ever starts out the way they want it, not even the children of billionaires. Maybe I'm wrong in the general worldview, but bringing this to my life? It's nothing but the truth. When people see me these days, they cannot imagine I was once a struggling nobody. No one does. But more than that, they would never believe that my life was more than design. I grew up in a household of successful white-collar job holders. Everyone went to the office each morning and was a professional taught on the four walls of a school. I tried to be what they expected. I wasted 3 years of my life studying weird medical terms that never interested me. But soon enough, I was tired of pretending, and although for the longest of times they refused to accept me for who I was, they eventually came around. My name is Sharon, and ever since I was a kid, there was something that got me interested in making sketches of designs, from bags to gowns to shoes. For the most part of my younger years, those who knew I had the inclination to design teased me and attributed it to having a feminine name, but that didn't stop me. Sketching in my notebook, I dreamt of the day my designs would strut down the runways of Paris and New York. When I finally got out of the small town I grew up in, getting into the light after I burnt the bridge of medical terms was a struggle I did not fully anticipate. I thought I could simply make my designs and overnight I would become one of the most revered designers that there ever was. Such naivety. Despite my undeniable talent and creativity, I struggled to find opportunities to showcase my work. The fashion industry was fiercely competitive, and without the right connections, breaking through seemed nearly impossible. Along the line, I decided to attend a local art school, where my professors were amazed by my eye for detail and unique sense of style. My designs were often inspired by nature and modern art, and it was unlike anything they had seen. After graduating with top honors, I moved to the city hoping to find my big break. But the city, with its towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, proved to be an equally formidable challenge. I took on various jobs to make ends meet, all while continuing to design in my small apartment during my free time. My dreams were lofty yet clear. I envisioned my creations on the covers of top fashion magazines, being worn by celebrities and admired by the world. I wanted to establish my own fashion line, one that celebrated individuality and bold, innovative designs. My ultimate goal was to show at Fashion Week, where the world's best designers showcased their latest collections. I knew I had the talent, all I needed was a chance to prove myself, but it was a dream that I kept for the future. The first step was to get known. To get known, I needed to put my name out for the world to see, but to do that, I needed a platform to stand on. This was where my adventure with Glam Fashion House began. Glam was one of the most prestigious fashion houses in the world. Known for its luxurious and avant-garde designs, Glam was a name synonymous with high fashion and elite status. The company's collections were regularly featured in top magazines and adorned by A-list celebrities on red carpets. For an aspiring designer like me, landing a job at Glam Couture was a dream come true. You could say it would be the golden ticket that could catapult my career to new heights. Glam's reputation was built on innovation, quality, and exclusivity. The fashion house prided itself on discovering and nurturing new talent. They were not known to often hire young designers, but for the rare times it did, the designers had some fresh perspectives that pushed the boundaries of fashion. For me, getting a foot in the door at Glam Couture was the opportunity of a lifetime. I believed that if I could just get noticed by the right people there, my designs would finally receive the recognition they deserved. So, I applied online and I waited. The day I received an email from Glam inviting me for an interview, I could hardly believe my eyes. This was the break I'd been waiting for. My heart raced with excitement as I reread the email multiple times, making sure it was real. The feeling I had the week leading up to the interview was not in any way different. I threw myself into a whirlwind of preparation. I selected my best designs, ensuring that each piece reflected my unique vision and creativity. I even added a few new sketches to demonstrate my latest ideas. Late into the night, I worked tirelessly, fine-tuning every detail. My apartment was small, but with the sketches, supplies, and rumpled papers that surrounded the apartment throughout the week, it looked smaller. On the day of the interview, I dressed in my sharpest outfit, a sleek, tailored suit that made me feel both confident and professional. As I stood in front of the mirror, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of all the hard work that had brought me to this moment. The interview process was intense. I was ushered into a sleek conference room where a panel of senior designers and executives waited. They scrutinized my portfolio with keen eyes, flipping through the pages with serious expressions. I presented my collection with passion, explaining the inspiration behind each design and how they embodied my vision of contemporary fashion. The room was silent, and I could see their interest growing as I spoke. When I finished, there was a brief, tense silence. Then, one of the senior designers nodded appreciatively. "Impressive work, Sharon. We can see your potential," she said. Relief washed over me. I had given it my all, and now I could only hope that it was enough to secure the position. I was elated when I got the call offering me a position at Glam Fashion House. It felt like all my hard work was finally paying off. I imagined myself working alongside the best in the industry, creating groundbreaking designs that would turn heads worldwide. However, reality hit hard on my first day. Instead of being part of the design team, I was assigned menial tasks: fetching coffee, organizing fabrics, and running errands. It wasn't the glamorous start I had envisioned, but I told myself it was just the beginning. I was told that, like every other well-known designer, I had to prove myself first. This was not a big deal, as I understood perfectly. Weeks turned into months and my role remained unchanged. I watched from the sidelines as other designers worked on collections. It was disheartening, but I clung to the hope that my opportunity would come. I spent my free time in the office sketching new ideas and refining my designs, determined to be ready when my moment arrived. One evening, while organizing the fabric samples, I noticed something strange. A design sketch on a senior designer's desk looked eerily familiar. As I got closer, my heart sank. It was one of my designs, one of the ones I submitted with my initial application that granted me the interview. The sketch had been slightly altered, but there was no mistaking the unique patterns and style that were distinctly mine. I was confused. I wanted to believe that it was a different design or that they altered it to add my name as one of the contributors. I was desperate to believe anything good at that point. Over the next few days, I discreetly checked other designers' workspaces and found more of my designs, all modified just enough to appear original. My excitement turned to horror as I realized what was happening. Glam Couture was stealing my work. The designs I had poured my heart into were being used without my knowledge. But what stung the most was the fact that there was no consent or acknowledgement below it. The devastation that washed over me was uncanny. The betrayal was something that I'd not expected to come from this fashion house. I idolized this company from afar, and the world knew them to stand for integrity and innovation among other things. So why? Why did they have to do this? The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if that was what they did to all new intakes, or if my case was just different. Whatever the answer to that was, I didn't want to stick around to find out. I was done being taken advantage of. So I reached out to Jamie. He was the only friend I made in fashion school, and I knew he would understand what I was feeling. I confided in Jamie, who was as outraged as I was. He suggested we gather evidence to confront Glam, but I knew that a direct confrontation could backfire. The company had resources and influence that I couldn't match, and aside from that, they were a known name in the industry. On the other hand, I was still a nobody. But as days passed, my initial devastation turned into an angry need for justice, for payback, in a way that would actually hurt the company publicly without bringing shame to my already unknown name. Instead of confronting them head-on and risking my career, I decided to fight back with a plan that would expose their deceit and bring them to their knees. My idea was simple yet brilliant. I would bait them with stolen designs that were sure to catch their eye but were not originally mine. I needed to ensure that these designs were recognizable enough to cause a scandal once the truth came out. I spent countless nights researching not so easily recognizable designs from famous designers and well-known people in the fashion industry, ones that they would not be able to spot at first glance. I knew that if I could replicate their styles convincingly, Glam wouldn't hesitate to steal them, thinking they were getting exclusive and groundbreaking designs. I carefully recreated these designs, adding subtle modifications to make them appear fresh while retaining their core elements. Once I got enough designs, I compiled a new portfolio with these designs and a couple of the designs I'd come up with working as a PA instead of doing actual design roles. Then, I sent the files to them to review. It was bait. I didn't know they would take it, but I had to be optimistic that they would, even though for the longest time, I didn't get feedback from them. But when I was about to think that the bait did not work, the day finally came. Glam announced their new line with great fanfare, and I could barely contain my excitement as I saw the previews. The collection was heavily based on the bait designs I'd provided, just as I'd planned. As soon as the collection hit the runway, the media and public were quick to notice the striking similarities to famous designs. Social media buzzed with comparisons, side-by-side images of Glam's new line and the original designs from renowned designers. The fashion community erupted in outrage, recognizing the blatant theft. At first, people did not want to believe that Glam would do such a thing, but it wasn't just a single design. There were multiple entries of the new line that bore similarities with previous designs that were not so popular. Not even those who were prepared to take a bullet and spin the narrative for Glam were successful in doing that. The best part about this was that I'd prepared to resign just in time for the new release, and since Glam did not think to feature me as a contributor to the designs, my name did not come up in the scandal, and they couldn't afford to pile another case of stealing designs from new designers to the already overshadowing scandal. I don't know if this is like a relatively recent thing that happened, but I would say in OP's case, they shouldn't rest so easy that they've completely gotten away from it, because it kind of feels like if it comes down to that designer who slapped their name on this design saying this is mine, being potentially held liable for something, they might at that point finally fess up and say, well, I took it from somebody else. Then somehow OP does get dragged into this lawsuit, right? That said, our next story is how my best friend betrayed me. What I thought was going to be a healthy competition between my best friend and I turned out to be me getting betrayed by her. I guess I have myself to blame for thinking I could trust her like a sister to never hurt me. My friend and I applied for the same job 5 years ago. This was when we both were struggling to make ends meet and living in a studio apartment. Claire was a bartender and I was a waitress at the same restaurant. We've always been like that. Once an opportunity arises, one person informs the other and we both apply for different positions. It was how we both got our jobs in the first place. She had gotten a tip from a friend that a new restaurant was about opening and in need of staffs, and this was an opportunity for us to both get jobs, so she immediately got me involved. We both got hired and had been working for 6 months when I bumped into a colleague of mine from college at the grocery store and we got talking. My colleague seemed to have had it figured out. She seemed to have done well for herself, so I decided to ask her for assistance in the job sector since I've been having crappy luck with that. She was kind enough to involve me on the latest vacancies available at the last company she worked for. There were 2 slots available, and my first instinct was that it could be a good opportunity for both Claire and I. Claire and I were both accounting students. This is how we met in the first place at college in the same lecture class, and what made it easy for us to apply for the same jobs. Claire was the smarter one. She got better distinctions and was faster at grasping things when we were in college, so a part of me was sure she would be the first to get a proper 9-to-5 job, and I was right. Despite my friend's help and connections, in the end, they only needed one person for the job since the other position had been filled and Claire was the better option. For a moment, I felt like a fool for sabotaging my chance at getting a steady 9-to-5 job, but then I remembered that it was Claire and she would always have my back, so that cheered me up. I decided I was going to be happy for her. After all, one of us finally got the dream job we always wanted. Claire finally started working and she loved it there. We would stay up most nights after a long day discussing about the latest going-ons at our workplace, and the pay was good, enough to cover our rents and bills, but I knew better than to burden my friend with the bills no matter how much she was making. I continued working as a waitress at the restaurant and was getting by with the little I was earning until some months later, Claire comes up with the idea that it was time to move to a bigger apartment. While this was a nice idea, we definitely needed a bigger apartment. Only one of us could afford the rent. I tried to explain the situation to Claire, but according to her, she had it covered. I think this was where the problems began. I should have insisted on us staying at our studio apartment till we were both financially capable of getting a bigger place, but I decided to stay quiet and go with the flow. We moved into a new apartment after a lot of back and forth, and it was nice. The place was larger and we both had our separate rooms and all. It wasn't until a week later I realized the apartment was a bit too far away from my place of work, while it was just the perfect distance from Claire's company. Claire was responsible for checking out the apartment during my work hours, So it occurred to me that it had to have been her intention in the first place, but I waved it off as a mistake. It must have just worked out in her favor, I thought to myself. I was broke by the end of the month. I had to double the usual amount I spent on transport while trying to pay my own half of the rent because Claire suddenly had to deal with family affairs and couldn't afford to pay the whole money. I was still in denial here. I believed every word that came out of my friend's mouth because I saw no reason for her to lie. She made up a sob story about her dad getting into an accident and needing half of the rent money she helped me with, so I had to pay her back for that, and because of how devastated she was, I had no idea she was manipulating things to her advantage. I was barely making ends meet. I couldn't afford to get essential things I needed, mostly because I had just paid back Claire's money. I knew it was time to get a serious job, and this time, I was determined to get a job. So I talked to Claire about letting me in on any slot available at her office, and she seemed cool with it. She didn't mind for a second, but a month turned into 2 and 2 turned into 3. Before I knew it, 6 months had gone by and there was nothing. So I decided to focus on my waitressing job, which wasn't paying as much as I needed. Suddenly, it occurred to me to speak to my friend who let me in on the first job opportunity. I was desperate and in need of a job ASAP, and it wouldn't hurt to try. I did this, and she was shocked to hear I hadn't gotten a job. She told me she would let me know as soon as something turned up. 2 weeks later, she delivered a message to me about how Claire's place of work were recruiting staff and encouraging me to apply. I did as she requested and was waiting on my roommate to inform me about this opportunity, but she never did. Even when we would spend hours talking about how I needed to find a better and more secure job, she never mentioned any recruitment ongoing at her office. I even decided to ask her about it, and she said nothing was going on for now, and she would let me know when an opportunity turns up. I was shocked. I wanted to cry. Actually, I did cry because I never expected her to lie so easily to my face. How could the person I live with, call my friend and sister, find it so easy to lie to my face? It was like she enjoyed watching me suffer. I followed all the protocols necessary, and through the help of my other friend, I was able to get a job at Claire's firm. It wasn't as elaborate as Claire's job, but it was something. I knew I wasn't overthinking things by the reaction Claire had to the news of me getting a job at her firm. She wasn't happy, and she did not fail to hide it. According to her, I had no right to apply for a job somewhere she worked, and even if I was planning on doing something like that, I should have consulted her first. This was when I lost it. I outrightly told her I had informed her many times about how I planned to change jobs, and she never once told me her workplace was recruiting anyone. She was at fault, and she knew it, but Claire wasn't having it, and neither was I. I knew my friendship was over, but it seemed Claire was done way before. She insisted I leave her apartment since it was under her name, and I insisted she paid back my share of the rent if she wanted me out so badly. She of course paid, and I left the apartment, but I was just so heartbroken by the whole ordeal, I had to go back home to my parents. They own a farm and lived far away from the city, but they knew Claire. They were all shocked at what Claire did. My mom blamed me for giving her so much access to my life, and honestly, I blamed myself as well. She made sure I didn't give on another opportunity that came my way, even when I was contemplating giving up on my new job. The problem was I didn't want to have to face Claire at work, but my mom encouraged me to man up and get over such feelings. I should be celebrating the fact that I'd gotten a job. She was right. I got an apartment and officially started work a month after the whole ordeal with Claire. We didn't see each other at work as I thought we would, mostly because we had different office sections and she worked at a different section from me. I bumped into Claire's dad during a random Sunday at a restaurant and decided to say hi. Claire and I were so close we knew each other's parents. I went over to say hi. He offered me an empty seat opposite him and I sat down. I guess he had no idea Claire and I had gotten into a fight, but if he did, he didn't in any way show it. I suddenly remembered Claire told me about her dad's accident and brought it up on while Claire's dad and I were talking. He had no idea what I was talking about. According to him, nothing of such happened. He was never in any accident. It sounded so funny to him as to why I would say something like that, and I told him it was information I got from his daughter. Claire's dad immediately sensed something was going on and asked me about it. I told him it was nothing and he dropped it. We had a nice lunch and called it a day, but later that night, I got a call from an angry Claire asking me to stay away from her family. It was the first time she must have called in about a year since we stopped being friends. It was at this moment I realized this girl had a lot of audacity and thinks she's something special. I told her that was never going to happen. If she wants her family to stay away from me, she can start by telling them what went down between us. I hung up on her and decided she wasn't worth the stress. This was the last time I heard from her. We bumped into each other a couple of times at work, but pretended not to know one another. Time had passed since my ordeal with Claire. I was at a better place. My fiance and I were planning on moving in together when I got a message from my boss requesting I meet with him. He explained to me that an opportunity to get a promotion was at the corner. He was going to retire soon and he would put in a good word for me. I was surprised. I had no idea my boss saw me as someone capable enough to handle such a big task as his. I was excited at the prospect of getting a promotion. I knew there were other parties gunning for the job, but had no idea Claire was among them until the day of my boss's retirement party. I overheard someone saying something about it. I wasn't really surprised. Of course she was gunning for a higher position at the office. We got called into a meeting with the stakeholders of the company and were asked to pitch on what we planned to do when the position officially became ours. I was very much determined to get the promotion, despite Claire having the upper hand. She had more working experience at the office, and she was in a higher position already than I was. We both made our pitches, and there were also some few other interested in the position, but I didn't see them as competitors. I eventually got the promotion, and the look on Claire's face knowing I would be her boss was worth it. She didn't try to hide her disdain, and I couldn't hide my excitement. I didn't have to do much. In the end, she couldn't handle having me as a boss and decided to quit. I guess her pride got the best of her in the end. I just don't understand any of the logic from Claire. Is it just they're just an awful person? Like, why intentionally backstab OP and try to hold them back when it wasn't even like a competition at that point? And then, like, it seems like they had a pretty decent job. They're willing to just burn bridges and quit because OP got a better position? Claire is like actively ruining their life because they just can't accept seeing themselves on an equal and or lower plane than OP? That said, our next story is, my biggest mistake was being too naive. I heard the strangest news of my life last September from my parents. According to them, my younger sister was 6 months pregnant with my fiance's child, and her trip to Germany was her going to start a new life with the man I considered my husband to be. I'm a 29-year-old female who never thought something as devastating as this could happen to me. I'm not new to betrayal. Strange things have happened to me in the past. I've had a friend go behind my back to say mean things about me to the family that hired me as a chef so she could steal my first cooking gig ever. I've had an ex try to con me, but luckily for me I found out early, but those were outsiders who I could easily part with. The worst part about this wasn't just what my sister did, but how I had to find out. From my mom's explanation, Shelly, my sister, and my fiance were once lovers. I had no idea they knew each other. I assumed the first time they met was at Thanksgiving. I made the mistake of inviting my fiance to my parents' house because he was Italian and had nowhere to be for Thanksgiving. This was 2 years ago. Ethan had just proposed and I was so excited and wanted to share the news with my family with Ethan present, so it was a win for us both. My parents knew Ethan but had never met him in person, and I assumed my sister also hadn't met him, so I took him home to show off my husband-to-be. My parents loved him, and my sister didn't have any problem with him. They didn't say much to each other but acted cordial to one another. We spent most of the night talking, my dad bombarding Ethan with questions while Shelly and I went to my room since we had a lot to catch up on. In the middle of our discussion, I asked my sister what she thought of Ethan, and she excitedly responded saying he was good for me. She never mentioned anything about knowing him, and it never occurred to me that they knew each other because of all the men I chose to date. I refused to believe it had to be my younger sister's ex-boyfriend. That was the last I ever spoke of him to her. This was mainly because we didn't have the closest relationship. She was a college student majoring in arts, while I worked as a chef and I was 7 years older than her. I had no idea she and Ethan had secretly been meeting up behind my back. When she got pregnant, no one told me anything. Then on this very day out of the blue, my sister gives me a call saying she and her friends were planning on going on a trip and she needed money. It was a bit random and sudden, but she rarely asks me for anything, so I just sent her the money. Although I did ask my parents if they were cool with it, and they had no objections. I had no idea I was sponsoring my sister's and my fiance's plans to elope. Nothing was suspicious. Ethan and I were good. We had started making plans on what to do. I had even started making the perfect menu for our wedding and looking for a dress while working twice as much to save up for some of the cost. Ethan was also a chef like me, but at the time he was having a hard time at work. He recently quit his job at the restaurant he worked at because, according to him, they were being underpaid and overworked. Now that I think about it, that was a month before he ran off with my sister. He did everything so quietly. He quit his job and then made an arrangement for his trip a month after my sisters left and never came back. I was told by him that he needed to visit his family because his mom was sick and in need of his attention. He had also been planning to inform his parents about our upcoming wedding, so it was best he went home. He packed light and most of his things were still at our apartment. There was nothing to suspect. The worst part about being deceived was my lack of discernment. I was so worried about him a week after he left and I'd heard nothing from him. I told my parents about my fears and they told me there was nothing to be worried about. He must be busy taking care of his sick mom, but I knew better. It wasn't like him not to call, especially since it had been a week. I called the few of his friends I knew to ask about him, and none of them knew about his trip. I tried to call his mom's number, but apparently it didn't exist. A lot of scenarios were playing in my head. I thought that his plane crashed or he was dead. I did my investigation and there was nothing about a plane crash. After 2 weeks of nothing, my parents told me to give up and stop searching. Maybe it was for the best. I knew my parents and it wasn't like them to be so nonchalant, especially when it comes to a missing person. I was determined I wasn't going to give up. Ethan had a little social life and few friends, who I also assumed were worried about him. I even involved the cops, who said it was beyond their jurisdiction since he left the city. I decided to hire an investigator who scammed me. By the second month, I was a wreck. Everyone tried to console me and said it was best I moved on. It just felt like I was the only one in pain by his loss, while others were doing fine, his friends included. I wouldn't have found out about Ethan and my sister if I hadn't scrolled through her page. It was my day off at work, and I decided to pry a little into my sister's social life. I thought she was back from her trip and in college doing her thing because that was what she told me about 2 months ago. I was just randomly scrolling through her page when I saw a picture of her seated at a restaurant. It wasn't obvious that she was pregnant, but what caught my attention was the ring on her finger. I thought nothing about it till I realized I also have the same ring. I decided to look at her surroundings and it looked foreign to me. Then I scrolled to the next picture and the one after. They were mostly selfies, but I could see a little of the environment. It dawned on me that my sister was still in Germany. I called my mom to relay the news to her, but their reaction wasn't as I had hoped. They weren't upset as I thought they would be. My mom just said it was her life and she could live it the way she pleases. I was confused. I asked them about her college degree and they said she could always go back when she was ready. I knew something was wrong. My parents, my mom especially, would never allow her child to just have her freedom, especially if she was still caring for her needs. I went home the next day, and upon my arrival, I could hear bickering between my mom and dad. I leaned in closely to hear what they were saying, and it was my dad trying to convince my mom to tell me about my sister's affair with my fiance. My mom was against it, saying it would break me. I think that would be a day I would call the worst day of my life. My parents knew where Ethan was, and didn't say a word despite seeing how broken I was over him. That hurt more than knowing my sister was pregnant from him. It was like everyone was deceiving me. I walked in on them talking and told them to explain everything. I was tired of being left in the dark. My mom was hesitant to talk, but my dad explained the whole situation to me. I had not only been betrayed by my sister, but my parents felt the need to hide something so important from me despite seeing the state I was in while searching for him. All I could think about was how easy it was for everyone to take my sister's side. Why was she the one who got the happy ending after stealing my man? I confronted my dad and mom on why they decided to take my sister's side, and they said they weren't taking any sides. They just did what they thought would be best for the family. I proceeded to ask who else knew, and of course, his friends were aware. I was the fool for searching for someone who didn't want to be found. I took off from my parents' house and called my younger sister. She didn't pick up any of my calls. My mom must have told her I knew everything. My parents tried to reach out to me, but I wasn't having it. Part of me knew it wasn't entirely their fault, but it was easier to be mad at them. I got rid of all of his stuff, but it didn't make me any less mad. I haven't picked any of their calls up since that day. They came by my apartment a couple of times to apologize. I didn't let them in. My sister, on the other hand, never called or texted to apologize. It wasn't like it could change anything, but it would at the very least let me know she felt bad about what she did. I was in the middle of work last month when I got a call from my mom. I didn't pick up at first, but then she called over and over again and I knew something was wrong. She sent a text telling me to come home as soon as possible, using my dad as bait. I rushed home thinking something had happened to my dad, only to be met with my sister and her baby in the living room while my dad looked fine. My sister, on the other hand, looked different. She had lost a lot of weight and looked different. I asked them what that was all about, and my mom began explaining the whole situation to me. Not to bore you with the whole details, the short version was that Ethan left her alone to care for the child after the honeymoon phase was over, and my sister has been struggling to make ends meet. I mean, that is what she gets for being a man-stealer. Of course he left her as soon as things got hard. It is what he does. I told my mom my sister's matter was none of my business since she wanted a child so badly and she got one. It was up to her to figure out how to care for her child. That is what mothers do. My parents, of course, began their usual story about how we're all a family and we needed to come together as one to care for the infant. I assured them I was never going to take part in what they were suggesting, and it is best they leave me out of it. I haven't gone back home since. Although I recently got a call from my mom telling me my sister was planning on taking her life because she couldn't face the shame of being a single mom. I told my mom Shelly needed to face reality as a single mom rather than giving into her manipulative act. If there is one thing my parents and I know, it's that my sister is too selfish to do that. She made her bed and she must lie on it. I definitely wouldn't say that I'm the kind of person that would just dismiss somebody who makes some kind of outcry like that, although I do think it is fair to have some level of skepticism when it's kind of like this character trait that they would do ridiculous things to get their way, get sympathy, get people to give them money or whatnot. I mean, I definitely don't think it's fair to just say, oh yeah, she's bluffing for sure, but you definitely can allow that to break your resolve and making sure that they continue to have fair treatment for how they've been. And to be fair, after all she's done to OP's kind of washing their hands of anything to do with their sister to begin with. They could say the craziest hyperbolic things and realistically, it probably wouldn't mean much to OP. They're not going to react to it. I mean, if you were in OP's shoes, could you ever forgive any of your family? Like, would there be a relationship after this? I'd like to know what you guys think. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.